Okay. Welcome to the April meeting of the Southampton Village Planning Commission. Wanted to start tonight just following up on the status of the proposal to amend gross floor area. So the trustees at their last meeting asked the Planning Commission to look at some of the areas within the R75 zone that have particularly small lots and see how the proposed GFA, I guess really look at two things. One is how the proposed GFA impacts that zone. And then secondly, how the lots in that zone are impacted by other zoning constraints currently in the code. Through Steve Funch, we hired Glynis Berry of Studio AB to do a study in that area. And she's looked at 54 lots in the Hillcrest area and 38 lots in the Pelletreau area, which are the largest number of lots in the village in the R75 zone. There are other R75 lots scattered, but these are the two biggest concentrations. The first thing is that in the Pelletreau Street area, there aren't special conditions to be analyzed. The average lot is 15,000 square feet. The smallest is 5,200 feet. And the biggest is 33,000 feet. So they're basically not impacted. There's one lot that might be somewhat impacted, but they're standard lots, and the average assessed value in that area is $1.1 million. So it's that's has certain characteristics. And there's one vacant lot in that area. And the average living area in the Pelletreau area is 1,500 feet, and the largest is 3,300 feet. So in many ways, while it is in the R75, has similar characteristics to the other streets in the village. In the Hillcrest Avenue area of the 54 lots that we analyze, it's very different. The average size of the lots is 6,900 feet, but the lots range from 540 feet to 14,000 feet. Now, some of these lots may be larger than they appear in our records because there are lots that cut across the line from the village to the town. And so what we'll show in the building records will be what's actually in the village, but we know some of those lots do blend over.
So like you said, there was 154?
Right, so it may be that there's a little bit more of a lot on the town side, but still a very tiny lot. What generally happens, according to the town, is when there's a lot that's in both the village and the town, a residential lot, but the house is in the village, the town cedes to the village the regulatory authority. So these come in under the village anyway. The number of lots that are, the area of the lots that are currently non-compliant of those 54 was 27 or roughly 54% of the lots were non-compliant. The biggest, over half of those are non-compliant because of width. They're too narrow. They have a much lower assessed value, $239,000 on average. 8 of those lots are vacant currently. They have an average of 2.3 bedrooms. At the living area, average is only 834 square feet. So these are very small. The largest one we could find is 1,500 feet. That's the largest currently in those 54 lots. And that's on 0.22 acre. or roughly less than half an acre. So, you know, this is an area that's fairly unique in the village because it's characterized by these very small lots. You know, I don't know enough about the relative history. I'm guessing that these were probably built before the modern zoning code came into effect. And so these are lots that have been in many different ways non-compliant for a very long time. That hasn't had much meaning to date because most of these have been basically untouched. So they are what they are, and like other houses in the village, they're non-compliant, and that doesn't mean much. But obviously the issue that's been raised is what happens if someone who owns those lots wants to build. The smallest lots have a lot width of 20 feet and a lot depth of 95 feet. So there's a total lot area of 1,900 square feet are basically under our existing code. Forget everything we've done recently. Are not buildable lots. So under any circumstance, they would have to go through some sort of variance process to build anything on those lots. And so I'm assuming the more likely, I'm sorry.
Well, just a question.
Right.
Does that include also expanding maybe in stories? I mean, would they still have to go through?
I think they still have similar issues because most of them now exist in a non-compliant mode. So basically anything they do, they're going to have to, of those lots. So to say the obvious one in those cases, the GFA is not a constraint for them because they can't build under the existing code anyway.
I'm sorry, so when you say they're non-compliant, the house that's on the
correct.
The house
you
that's
couldn't
on there.
build today under any circumstance.
Already.
Right, most of them are one-story houses. They're fairly wide. Sometimes they're very, very close to the house next door.
Yep.
They're little ranches, basically.
Yeah, or they don't have a big enough lot for modern septic tanks or whatever. They're just not, they're non-compliant lots. And so probably over time, you know, usually lots like that get combined.
Get combined.
There are a number of lots that have a width from 40 feet to 60 feet. And so they range in size from about 3,800 feet to up to 7,500 feet, but not at 7,500 feet. Those lots have been impacted by two things. They've been impacted by the pyramid law that was put into effect 12 years ago, I guess. Yeah. I think it's 12 years ago now. And so what happens is, you know, the pyramid law really has an impact on the shape of the house. That size lot, it's very difficult, if not impossible, then to comply with the front pyramid law. They actually can do it on the sides, but the house cannot go far back enough to comply with the front pyramid law because of the configuration of lots. Again, no one's known this because no one's built there, so it's just been, I think, something we're just sort of understanding now. The other thing is that the new setback rules, again, these very narrow lots cannot comply. So the lots less than 7,500 square feet, the GFA again has no impact because the most you could build, assuming you could get around the pyramid law and the setback law, you're limited because of the geometry. You're limited to, I think, 1,350 feet. Which again is considerably bigger than virtually any other house other than one in that area.
And you can build a basement.
You can build a basement, you can do the attic, but that's how much GFA you can basically squeeze onto the lot. So it's less than you're permitted either under the existing or the proposed.
That they're counting.
Right. But the way we do GFA.
Yeah.
Department of Health Services
Right.
also has an impact.
Right. Right, and the Department of Health also has an impact because there's a certain distance now, I guess, that you need to have the septic from the house.
Right, on the
Right.
property line.
From the property line. So these are very constrained lots under any circumstance. At 7,500 feet and above, these lots are like any other lot in the village. It's the math that we've all talked about in terms of the reduction in square footage under the new zoning. So, for example, at 7,500 feet, there's a difference of 152 feet. You basically have a maximum gross floor area of 2,200 feet, which is 750 feet bigger than anybody's built to today.
And
So it still allows a much bigger house than anyone
Finished basement,
currently has,
too.
and the finished basement, the attic, and the garage, and everything else. But it is those, in effect, smaller lots, and particularly the middle lots, because the smallest lots have always been non-compliant. It's the ones in the middle that we're realizing both the pyramid law for many years and now the setback rules have an issue. And so I think that's what. So number one, and I apologize, I thought I would have a report tonight to give out, but we found an error, as I mentioned, so it's all getting redone. I'll circulate it around to everyone here, and then I think we'll try to put it on the village website. Nothing of a surprise. I don't want to circulate something that's inaccurate. Very, very hard to take it back because we had to do a bunch of diagrams that need to change. But that's the circumstance now. So what we now understand, which I can say personally I didn't understand before, was that in those small, very small lots, you have a problem both complying with the pyramid and with the setbacks.
So what's the final conclusion?
Well, I think we have to, I don't know whether I have a final conclusion, honestly, but I think, there's two different ways to handle that. And part of the problem is, what Glynis has lectured me on a lot is the law of unintended consequences. If you go too far, you end up getting things you don't expect. So there's two different ways to do it. One would be to, in effect, set up within the code a automatic hardship relief at the ZZBA for those lots. In effect, let the ZBA rule a hardship to let someone get exempted from the setback and the pyramid with some guidelines of what the relief would be. The other, right, which I think is the right way to do it, and I think maybe is how Sag Harbor does it. So, for example, you say you don't have to comply with the 15 feet, but you still have to center the house on the lot, right? So, something that gives the ZBA some guidance, and then on the pyramid law, allow relief from the front pyramid, because I don't think
Well, they would decide then. Yeah.
Right, so that, and then you would have some oversight, so when you're giving the relief, you're doing it for a legitimate
Are you
reason.
going to specifically name these tax map numbers or not?
I don't know. This is just,
By lot width.
right, lot width within the R75
Right,
zone.
exactly.
Right.
On the Pelletreau area, which area was considered?
It's Pelletreau, I'm trying to remember, I think a piece of David White's, if I remember, is in the R75.
Okay.
I don't have the code with me.
Pulaski?
Pulaski, I'm pretty sure.
You want that?
Yeah, sorry. Find the map.
So on Pelletreau, there was a data error in the database, and that size is being validated, but we believe it's not a 7.5.
I can't record that.
Oh, sorry, Charlie.
You gotta sit in the front row, or if you want to speak.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think we needed to validate a Pelletreau again. I think we identified an error in one of the databases with respect to the lot size, because when we visually reviewed it, it did not look like it was the size that was outlined. So we're going to go back and revisit that.
Right. The one lot that we thought was too
Right,
small.
right.
Right. Sorry.
Not in there? Did I take something out?
No, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's Pelletreau, Poplaski, to David White's, that
Yeah,
area.
that little pocket.
Yeah, that pocket, so there's an R75 pocket.
Is
There's some much smaller pockets in the
Halsey Avenue a part of that or not?
I think-
Actually, we think it was Elm
Right.
and Bailey Road.
Right,
Obviously, there were a couple on Burnett,
right.
and just a couple scattered around the village, although one has to be cautious, because when we looked at all these lots, some of them were actually adjoined to bigger lots, or they crossed town or school district lines. So each one of these has to be visually
Right.
checked.
Right.
But what about the area a little north? where am I thinking?
And we found, yeah,
Dale Street.
there were a couple on Dale Street as well, and those are legitimate.
And you know, the funny thing about this is Dale is the street we looked at that we began to get concerned because
Yes.
the houses were so much bigger than the existing ones and the lot coverage was getting so intense.
Yeah,
on
that was
street.
part of the study.
Yeah, part of the study was what we saw in Dale was, you know, on tiny lots, people were putting in pool houses. Which is really changing the
Right.
nature of those lots, so. That's why I think we have to be very careful not to try to solve it, create other problems. But, so Eduardo, to answer what you asked, I think that's one route. The other route is obviously to put it in the code. I just think it's very hard to, I've been asking Glynis to figure out a way to write it. It's very hard to write it in a way that, all the things you've pointed out in the past, you just end up with stuff you didn't mean to make happen.
So there just has to be a relief valve.
That's my thought, but again, I don't know what anyone thinks,
Well,
or...
I think that that's fine.
Yeah, I think that
I think it needs more study. I just want to caveat, this is really surface, and I think this needs, we need to complete the analysis, and then we need to all talk about,
Exactly.
we as a group think there's a way to solve it.
And I think the thoroughness of the analysis that we're doing is warranted, and it's really, I think it's very, very positive. When you look at this, see how much non-conformance we're going to create in terms of.
Right.
Well, that was always a concern.
Right. I mean, I guess, in a way, it's a good thing, people reacted because of the GFA, but the lots they were concerned about are actually not a GFA issue. We thought it was a slot coverage issue. That's actually not the issue.
No.
It's actually a pyramid and
Pyramid and
setback
setback.
issue. So,
And a potential Department of Health issue. They're becoming stricter.
so I think in part, this problem will self-correct, because I think people will start to combine lots, which is the obvious answer. If you take 2 or 3 of these lots and combine them, then then you get over that problem. And certainly with these type of assessed values, that may be the most economic way to solve it. But we don't want to force people to do that. That's certainly not the mission of the village.
But on Hillcrest, they are on public water.
Correct.
They are on public water. So the health department issues are much less than
Less
on
there.
public water.
The need that was identified,
Right.
first of all, this is very good analysis because it's property by property
Right.
and with visual checks.
Yeah.
The need that has come to the Board of Trustees are for longstanding community members that want their in-laws to move in with them or to be passed on to next generations, and they need a bit more space. It makes perfect sense.
Right.
And so that hardship seems very real,
Right.
and I think we need to figure out how to work with that,
Right.
like Sag Harbor has.
Right.
We did stumble across the fact that 30% of the properties are owned by 5 investors already. So if you analyze that, there's a strategy in place, obviously, where people are looking to cobble together these properties
Right, Jack?
up on Hillcrest and Miller, yeah.
Well, again, I think that would be a ZBA, the hardship question, for it to provide more space, et cetera.
I think we also want to study Sag Harbor because that's probably the other town that has these
Little,
very small lots. Some of the
Yeah,
back
they do.
streets in Sag Harbor have these tiny, tiny lots. And I know they've provided for different zoning for those lots versus the standard lots. They probably, next to us, have the biggest variety in lot size. And East Hampton is different than our village in many ways, but one way it's different is lots tend to be much more regularly sized. So if you go down the street in East Hampton, the lots tend to be the same, not always, but usually tend to be very, very similar sizes, where ours are, on any street, vary a lot. So.
I just don't want to lose sight of the simplicity thing that we were aiming
Right,
for.
right. Any other questions, comments?
Well, I think that
Right.
the same point rehashing in a sense is that I also think that in parallel to any change that we do, I think that we should review the procedures and the sign-off procedures and make sure that somehow that it should not only be the building department that sign offs on compliance. Because I don't think the building department is really equipped in terms of tools or in terms of to really certify full compliance. And that the application should be that the licensed professional involved, whether it's a registered architect or professional engineer involved in that project, should at the end of the day certify compliance with the zoning. And I think that's an important element. Because I believe that a licensed professional will not jeopardize their license for no
That's not the case currently, Mark?
No. Right now, the compliance is only signed off by the
Building department, that's all. And we've been
And
asking
so
for this.
the GFA, the pyramid law, the maximum height, the lot coverage are all certified at compliance.
And so let me put it a little differently. So the architect submits the plans,
Right.
or the licensed engineer for that matter. They go to the building department does a review. They say, this isn't compliant, this isn't. If there are fines and a process in theory if someone doesn't build according to those plans, and if they find that the 10 feet is really 8 feet.
Exactly.
But we don't have a process where the architect loses his license, for example, if it's not in compliance. It's just
Or
not a
fined.
process. Or fine a significant amount of money.
Or require a survey that
Right.
actually gives the height of the final building, that there's a surveyor who measures the height.
Well, usually you have a survey, but the survey is done because you need a mortgage or something, and that doesn't necessarily go to the building department, right?
Exactly.
Right, so there is a survey out there somewhere.
Right, but the floor area, the GFA
I
is
thought all the
not
building
checked.
permits came with a disclaimer that it was up to the,
It is, but there's not,
There's no
so
teeth to that
in some jurisdictions, the architect stamps and has their license at risk.
right.
At completion, before the issue of certificate of
The
occupancy,
architect has to come back.
the architect has to come back and also
Right.
certify that there is compliance.
Well, it's my understanding that the building department goes along through stages of building.
Sure.
So it's not
Yeah,
just
no.
one thing.
No. I think it's just the question Mark is raising, which we need to, I think, study a little more, is whether if you required the licensed professional who's submitting the plans, whether it's the engineer or the architect, and they had to sign off again at the end
Yes.
when the house
right,
is finished,
Right.
would that create more compliance? Because, there's virtually no one who wants to lose their license. It's not,
If that would happen.
right. So, okay, yeah, sorry.
And I've heard this before, and it's not falling on deaf ears, but I also have to reiterate, we really need to get together with the folks in the building
Right.
department and tactically figure out, how does this really work? What is the
Right.
benefit to
Right.
them? Will it be intrusive to their process?
Right.
What are
That
we
would have
giving
to
up?
be, yeah.
What are we gaining?
Discussion. yeah.
Right. Is this something that they think would be helpful in
Before
what
it could
they
be
do?
presented as a.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think they should have any objection because, the licensed professionals then certify the lot coverage, you would actually measure,
Right,
would
right.
require a survey that actually shows the building height provided by someone else, not just the
Yeah,
original.
it takes a little pressure off, maybe.
I think
Need
it
a-
would.
We just need a compelling
Right.
argument
Right.
with data on the volume that we have, the benefit we're to get, the cost, all of that.
Right, right.
I'm not disagreeing, I'm just saying
Right.
there's more heads that actually work day to day.
Right.
And now that I spend a lot of time with the building department, so.
Very complicated job.
Yeah, it may add a little cost, but I think it's a win-win situation where, everybody's satisfied that there is compliance.
But shouldn't the cost be to the applicant, not to the village?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Well, it would be, yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, so I want to bring up a second issue. So, as some of you may know, at the last meeting of the Planning Commission, someone raised the issue of the Southampton School Board, who are looking
right.
to purchase a house. I think they were in contract actually to
Yeah,
purchase.
Jay did,
Existing house,
yeah.
Jay Leasing brought up, existing house on Narrow Lane to use for office space. And I thought it's something we should talk about, I guess, for two separate reasons. One is, in the past, when the town had looked at creating a new special zone to create a shopping center on Tuckahoe Road, we had weighed in on it, not because we have a right to decide what the town does, but that it just, as the planning commission for the village, we thought it was an appropriate land use for something that was immediately adjacent to the village, and we wrote a letter. It appeared at the town board. So that's first. And secondly, we spent, I think, about a year looking at North Sea Road. There was a great deal of divided opinion in our group of what to do. But ultimately, what the trustees decided was to leave the special office, the district, in place. And there was a decision made that that was an important land use in the village and was appropriate to that area. We had mixed feelings on it, whether or not to allow for retail in that zone or not, and very complicated study. And the good news in some ways is that the vacancy rate on that street has declined ever since, whether because owners were holding back space to see what happened or the market got better or whatever. But we did find in that, as many of us pointed out, that the village office market was fairly weak and there was a lot of the vacant space, and we were concerned to us. And office is one of the things that keeps the business district going because you have people who are here every day. And we've also been encouraging through our zoning for, office. We no longer allow office space, for example, on the ground floor on Main Street, New Nugent Street, Windmill Lane, and Jobs Lane. So we've been encouraging office to be in what I guess one would call the proper areas, either second or third floor in the village center, or in existing office buildings. So I think the issue, perhaps, and that's why I wanted to get everyone's opinion, I know there are people in the audience interested in this issue, is, one other thing I think the traditional concern you have with planning is the spread of non-conforming uses, first of all. And then secondly, this is a fairly limited office market, and so, if governmental agencies basically start to use non-office space, it just is not, I think, a good thing either for the office district or a way to give the private office market an indicator that we really want to see office growth take place in the areas that are zoned for office. So I wanted to throw that open for discussion, get comments from the audience, and then see if
But I think in this case, though, although it's office, it's a school.
It's for the school.
It's for the school. So,
Right.
very often when it's either a not-for-profit or it's an education institution, then you have the community facility exception that's allowed normally as a right in a residential neighborhood.
That's what they're saying.
Well, no, they're actually doing it through their exemption from zoning.
Oh.
Is how they're doing it. Yeah, because to get the community facility, you'd have to go through a process in the village, and they don't want to go through the village process. So they're what they propose, at least, I believe, and we'll hear from the audience that maybe I have it wrong, but I believe what they've proposed is to use their exemption from zoning.
Is that what was decided at the last school board meeting? Because there was some...
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so.
Okay.
So, other comments, questions, thoughts?
Well, what are the neighbors saying?
Well, let's.
I want to know. What are the people
Members
saying?
of the audience, so I just ask if you're going to speak, please, because I'll get yelled at otherwise, please come to the podium, give your name, and make your comments.
I'll start. My name's Julia McCormick, and I live at Farrington Close, which is the property adjacent to 50 Narrow Lane. I also serve as the president of the condominium association, so I represent 30 homeowners. All of us who live at Farrington Close, we purchased our homes knowing that we were living across the street from the school. We also knew at that time we were living across the street from a fire station. So we knew that we were on the edge of the educational and municipal properties. But this change, which is taking the other side of the street, which has been residential, and there are, in fact, about 250 homeowners. Farrington Close is one, Pheasant Close the other, Canterbury Mews is across the street. This conversion of this home will house 19 employees on a day-to-day basis. They have stated that they intend to put in 8 parking spaces in the front yard, and across the street they have plans for a parking lot that will have an additional 30 spaces, which will obviously accommodate the individuals who will be crossing the street to use the administrative building. And frankly, the increased traffic for the area is problematic. The area is already, it is a public street, but it is for the buses and for families that are coming and going. It's often considered really to be used as a driveway. When one is leaving the high school and their large parking lot, whether it's the buses or individual cars, the perception is that Narrow Lane is just an extension of the school. There will be a significant increase in traffic. Also, frankly, their hours that they state that they'll be using the building will be between 8 and 4. But in any school building, what happens is that at 5 o'clock in the morning is when business really begins, whether that's janitorial services, oil delivery, supply delivery. It's going to change the characteristic of the neighborhood. We have also separately some concerns about the fact that the school campus is actually now going to be moving across the street. And a final point that I'll make about it is that when the school was beginning their process of evaluating what their needs were, they stated that they needed 12,000 square feet to accommodate the work that would be done in their new administrative building. This building, which is currently for a little over 4,000 square feet, once they've completed their renovations, will be over 7,000 square feet. Those 7,000 square feet in no way comes to the 12,000 square feet that they said that they needed. One of our concerns is that this will merely be a pass-through. It will be acquired by the school, used by them for a number of years, but it probably won't meet all of their needs in a relatively short period of time. But how the building will be used and it's being taken off the tax rolls will be permanent once they have left, because if they own the building, they'll not be subject to property tax. If they then were to lease it, it would still be off the tax rolls. And all of these issues are of concern to us. Some of these are directly related to your work and some are ancillary. So, thank you.
So my name is Peter Nowicki. I've lived at Canterbury Mews for roughly about 25 years. My real concern is the amount of money that's being spent on this project. It's come down a little bit to $5.2 million from an initial sum that was closer to $6 million. It just seems like a totally inappropriate way for the school to spend our money. It's money that perhaps could be spent on education. As you know, we had a lockdown in the school. Security is a big issue. Guns are a big issue. Opioids are a big issue. The quality of the education that that the school is providing to the students is a big issue for me. I think there's better ways to spend the money. There is a more efficient way of housing the administration staff that's on campus, not off campus. It doesn't make any sense to staff people across the street, creating all sorts of traffic conditions that are going to be disruptive to the neighborhood. Also, the parking spaces dig deeply into the track and jumping field. So as it's envisioned right now, there's going to be, well, from the drawing that appeared in the Southampton Press, there's going to be 30 parking spaces that are going to be adjacent to the running track and adjacent to the jumping track, and also adjacent to Canterbury Mews. It's just not enough space to put a structure like that in, and it really makes absolutely no sense given the fact that there is an ample supply of parking spaces on Narrow Lane that the school can use, albeit across the street, but there's an ample amount of spaces. When the firehouse went in, we worked closely. We realized there was a need for the firehouse. Canterbury supported the firehouse all the way, worked with Mayor Epley to make sure that things were done correctly, that the green area was preserved and not made into a parking lot. So, you know, we want to work with the school to find a better solution. We want to work with the taxpayers of the village and the town whose kids go to the school to make sure the money's spent well. Spending money to have a small facility like that, which is a cesspool facility, to have 19 people using it is really a health risk, and it could affect the water supply, and it could affect all sorts of other aspects of, you know, just the way it smells when a cesspool fills up. I think those issues are, you know, the way the high school has over the 25 years that I've been there always behaved is they've used their exemptions from the zoning laws and all the other regulations. They've just totally went out for it and always used it, whether it was the storage facility that was put right next to our hedge, whether it was the painting of the track, whether it's the fires, the noise, or all the other things. If you look at the back of our hedge, all the building materials are right there. The high school is really not a good neighbor, so we'd like to be a good neighbor. We'd like to help them find a solution to do this more effectively and to spend our money in a more efficient way. That's pretty much it.
My name is Mark McIntyre. I live at 72 Narrow Lane, which is the residential property just across the street next to the proposed school building. For the board purposes, that lot is currently designated as an R20, so it's a half-acre lot, and the just under 5,000 square foot residential house is currently a 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom house that sits on that lot. So by taking and expanding it to 7,200 square feet, which will take it to 2 stories in all directions, you're changing forever the residential flavor of a residential street on the left-hand side of Narrow Lane. I think it's important as a village that all the hard work you do here to maintain the flavor of the village, when the school steps out of that flavor, just because they can doesn't mean that they should. And I think it's important that we have an opinion that we all work very hard to maintain the flavor we have as an entity in the village. And when we allow, not that we can control it because they are exempt from our village and our town restrictions because they are a school. But I think we should have an opinion that says that's not right to the residents that are there. The other concern that I have is that you don't just take a property off our tax rolls, you take a neighborhood off our tax rolls. We've already been approached by a energetic real estate agent who's flooded both Farrington Close and Canterbury and our house with a letter that says, encouraging us to list our property before the value falls because of the new office building going next door. So what concerns me from a tax standpoint, there are 250 residences and they range from condominiums to very large properties. I promise you, each of those people are going to go protest their tax rolls to lower the tax base because we've propped an office building in the middle of what is a residential neighborhood. What that means is 250 houses have the opportunity to lower their tax base, so we change the flavor of the neighborhood, and then we transfer a tax burden from 250 houses to all the remaining residents of the village, which I also think is unfair. But what I think is germane probably to this organization is we really need to work to preserve, we should have an opinion on how we feel about taking what is a residential property completely surrounded by residential neighbors and converting it simply because we can, not because we should.
Any other comments? Yes.
I really have a question. Jay Deasing, a resident of the village. Is that standard that a school can purchase any parcel in a village and it becomes...
Well, they have to show, obviously, a public purpose for it. They have to go to a vote, which I think they're doing in May. So there's a process they need. It's just as the state, for example, can, because they are, in effect, a state agency, the state can come into the village and say, we want that piece of property for X. There's a process they go through, but they're not governed by the village. So, yes. Yes, they can. And you know, that's a sort of a safety valve, if you will. So schools that have a public purpose, and they don't want to be in a spot where the school is in danger, but the village will allow them to do something that's important to them. So the short answer to that is yes. There is a process they go through. I think they've filed or need to file an environmental analysis, and and then there's a vote, and there's, I think, public hearings that they're doing. So there's a process that they go through. It's very similar to what the state goes through.
Right. Yeah. Yes, because, for example, on Pine Street, not all that long ago, a parcel that was actually adjacent to the elementary school was on the market.
Right.
And so, you know, that certainly could have been a better spot. That was sort of a somewhat dilapidated two-family home, and you know, some community input and conversation might have been better utilized a few years ago if that's what they were seeing as their only alternative, that they needed to acquire additional space. Although it seems that they're, you know, on the campuses there might be room to put a building.
Right. They also there's a study that they posted on their website where they looked at all alternative sites, and not a surprise to those of us who spent our time on the North Sea Road study, there were a number of options on North Sea Road in existing office buildings, but they somehow opined, which I don't totally understand, that the cost of fixing up existing office space was the same cost as converting a single-family home into an office building. Exactly the same. Which I just can't get my arms around.
New math.
Right. So, you know, if you take an existing office space that's been used as office space and basically upgrade it and modernize it and, you know, do whatever you need to do, that, according to their study, was the same cost as taking a single-family house with little bedrooms and converting that into an office building.
Really?
So, you know, if you look at that, then the numbers come out, you know, in a certain way. You know, I think if you had looked at that with, you know, what I would think a more typical cost of creating office space in an existing office building, the numbers would be different. So again, I get concerned that I think we might have on the Planning Commission is this is just going to open the door to other people saying, even though we have all this existing vacant office space in the village, gee, I want to take this other the building and convert it to office space. You know, the school board did, and you know that's something that often happens over time. So obviously the hospital has a lot of houses that purchase over time. I don't think any of us think it's a good thing from a zoning point of view or neighborhood character point of view, but there are times there's no choice. I guess one of the concerns I have, a little bit like the shopping center, is I'm not convinced there's no choice. Whereas if there were no office space in the village, or we had a 95% occupancy rate, and office space here costs, you know, $50 a foot, I think we'd say, look, you know, this is what they need to do.
Probably just proximity.
Right. I mean, everyone likes to be across the street. That's, you know, I'm sure a big piece of the issue. Like, we all would like to work across the street rather than, you know, have to drive 6-7 blocks. Or walk. Or take a bicycle, or whatever. So I'm sure that's I'm sure that's a big piece of it.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I didn't quite understand how that worked. Thank you.
Understood.
There are other people in here.
Hi, Regina Grieven, resident. I have a question. You mean there's no other possibility for the school to gain some office space? Why don't they make a deal with the hospital that's going to be moving? So maybe take a portion and fix that up. I mean, that's already.
Part of their issue is they need something that they have security long term. So, you know, for example, in the hospital where the hospital's going to move and no one knows what the long-term future of those buildings are, I think that's difficult for them to justify in their budget process. I think the office buildings, you know, I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming if you went to one of those owners and say, you know, we want the right to get a 20-year lease, that person would consider that the red letter day for their next 10 years.
Right.
So, you know, they would be very happy. So I think the office buildings, the existing office inventory in the village should provide a good alternative.
Because then they wouldn't be infringing on the people who have the homes on that street where they want to move to.
Right.
Which I think they have to consider that as well, not just their considerations. There are other people to consider.
Right.
People who live there,
Yep.
right? Because once you open that door, other doors will be the same, right? Okay, thank you.
My name is Stuart Sklar. I also reside at 72 Narrow Lane. Paul, when you talk about options that weren't thoroughly explored, just to shed some light in case not everyone's familiar with the study you referenced that's available on the website, the natural kind of option that we felt was where their current structure is, where the office is currently located, is a trailer that was never intended for the length of time that they've been there. And it is dilapidated, and we support the construction and the fact that they do need to move. When we challenge them in terms of why wouldn't they just use that designated space right now and build a new office, they said that they had looked at that as an option. However, it actually cost more than 50 Narrow Lane because the assumptions that they made were inaccurate, and they didn't even look at a prefabricated building. And just like prefabricated homes that are being created in the village and throughout different areas, are a very efficient way and a timely way of construction. And office buildings the same way. And you can get a prefabricated building that could be done at a much more cost-efficient way and a much more timely way. When you look at the analysis that they conducted of creating a new building versus 50 Narrow Lane, they baked into the number of building on the current premises $500,000 to house and to relocate displaced workers for 3 years. Okay? Otherwise, that would be a cheaper option. So when you look at $500,000 for 3 years, why, number one, would it take so long? Well, that's the length of the construction of building new and permits and passes and things like that. Well, that seems like a ridiculous window of time. And then secondly, you have to ask yourself, why would it cost that much anyway? There's got to be alternatives like putting people in schools and turning up temporary space that wasn't explored as well. So I guess my bottom line point is the options haven't been thoroughly explored, and the numbers, when you look at those charts, it's evident that they're not accurate numbers. So it's not an apples to apples analysis by any means, in addition to all the points that everyone else raised. Thanks.
Any other comments?
This lady back here.
Deborah Bates. I just had a question. My understanding is that once they purchase the property, they're exempt from all regulation by the village?
Right, they're not
from any zoning or even a transitional zone. You know, there's a.
We should review that.
Right.
It just seems, and the purchase hasn't been made yet.
I think they're in
contingent.
contract.
It's contingent.
Right.
It's contingent on approvals from the village?
No, it's contingent on the
On a vote from the public. So
referendum.
that's the only thing that is preventing them
So
from
far.
Well, they're going through a process. As I said, they have a process they need to go through, just like any public authorities. Think of them as a public authority.
Yes.
Which is probably the best way to think of them, like the water authority or, you know, the
Or a church.
Well, yeah, churches are a little different. Let's sort of use the non-religious. So LIPA, for example.
Oh, they're actually regulated by New York State.
Right, they're regulated by the state, and they fall under the state code, not the village code.
So anything in terms of transitional zones where you have a residential, and none of that would apply once the
Correct.
deal is done?
Right.
No.
I think we should review that because I think that they need to look at other alternatives.
No, they do,
There
yes.
needs to,
Right.
there needs to be a real reason not to
Right, they have to
comply.
do an environmental review, they have to show why this is the best environmental alternative.
So no architectural guidelines, no zoning, no building department regulation, they can just do whatever?
No, I mean, they have to comply with general building regulations in the town, so.
Or in the village? I'm just curious, it's such an unusual circumstance.
Well, it's not really, I mean, we have other publicly owned buildings in the village, they all.
But they already own the property and it's
Right, but those
already
have happened
done. It
over a
hasn't
period
been,
of time, so.
seems completely.
But if, it's no different in effect, as what I was pointing out, if LIPA came tomorrow, which is state-owned, and said, I need to have this site because
Well,
I need
but
to.
they're a public utility, all right, I mean.
But again, they fall under the same general type of rules. They're all state entities.
State regulated.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I would hope that the village does everything that they can to keep a regulatory presence.
Can't do it.
Can't do it.
Get out the vote.
Yeah. Tell everyone, May 15th is the vote.
So in the case of Tuckahoe, we wrote a letter to the
Yeah, we
town,
did, to the town.
which got placed in the record, saying that we were not supportive of the shopping center. We thought there were better options, and I guess the question is, would there be support for writing a letter to the school board?
Yes.
Saying we would encourage them to look at existing office space and other options rather than.
Yeah. I mean, you can put down a metal building like Walmart and finish the inside, and it's wonderful.
Right.
And it's quick, and it's easy, and it's good.
Right.
And you can take it apart later.
Right. I mean, I don't think as the planning commission, our role is to
No, we're not going to, no, I understand. I understand.
It's really just from the planning point of view, I think we've tried to encourage, the shopping center, one of the things we talked about is we thought it was very important for the growth to happen in the village center and in the existing zones.
Right.
And that's why and in the same way here, it's why we were supportive when someone wanted to open a grocery on Hampton Road, because we thought it was encouraging that focus. And so, I think in the same way, this is, whether it's and I think Eduardo's right, if you're working in the school and you look across the street and see an available building, that seems like a,
Well, if you
great
look at
option.
Leland Lane, at the middle school, and that whole other side is all residential.
Right.
And it's very nice.
Right.
It sort of keeps the school over there, and then people have their nice homes there.
Right.
And I don't think there should be incursion.
But on Leland, was it Dr. Corman was on the corner at Leland?
Yes.
Right.
The red house that's on the
Yeah, but he's right on the corner of that other one.
But was there a lot between them?
No, that land would have been contiguous to the school.
Right. And then you even have the architect's office on the corner of Leland and Hampton Road. Like there's.
Yeah, but it's right on the corner.
But
Yeah.
at least Leland, there is some precedent for it.
Right. Here, there's no precedent.
No.
There's nothing on the east side of the road from Hampton Road to.
No, there isn't.
To Wickenham.
I guess this will be the first precedent.
Well, that's the worry, isn't it?
And that's the issue, I think, is do we now open up that to seem like, okay, this is another place you can do other uses?
Can I just add one little thing?
Sure. You have to.
So the article in Southampton Press this weekend, for the record, had incorrectly depicted where Farrington Close is.
Okay.
So I'm a little worried that an official planning design picture that was sent to the newspaper actually has Farrington south of the building and not north of the building. It shows some concern about the reliability of the architectural drawing, and if we're making decisions on the plans, at least let's get the location right. Thank you.
Who is their architect anyway? Does anybody know?
No one I know.
We're only working with one architect who supposedly the board has a long-term relationship with.
Oh, how nice.
And this one architect.
It's a Mid-Island.
Yeah, did the entire analysis, and when we asked for other perspectives, they said they didn't get them, they only worked with that one, so.
Oh, your tax dollars at work?
So, so are people supportive of sending a letter?
Yes.
So I will draft and send around to everyone a draft for comment.
But maybe we could even
Appear at one of the meetings.
appear at
Yeah.
the meetings and take an official position. We should review whether the village wants to take an official position.
I think the village, you know, is
And
probably
encourage
not
people-
going to take an official
They're not?
position, is my guess. Just, it's a funny role for them, just like they didn't on the shopping center. You remember the shopping center?
That's true.
The trustees did not.
Well, but Mark-
individuals on the trustee.
Yes,
of the
they did.
trustees
They
did.
showed.
They
And
showed up.
and they talked.
Right, but they didn't, as a group, provide an official position.
So when is the next school board meeting?
We have the
This
schedule.
Tuesday
I
at
put your
7
money down.
o'clock.
When, I'm sorry?
It's this coming Tuesday at 7 o'clock at the intermediate school. And there'll
Okay.
also be a public forum on April 28th, also at the middle school at 11 a.m.
So it should, the letter should be there in representation before the referendum.
Oh, yeah.
But maybe the village could advertise or, and
Well, I think they have
encourage,
to advertise the
encourage
hearing,
people
for
to
sure.
vote.
Right.
Certainly encourage people to vote and take an active, because there's an important decision to be made. So at least ask people to vote or make an encourage.
Do you want to publish the letter in any kind of newspaper?
I think last time we didn't. We just.
No, we didn't, I
We
know.
just sent it to the board and appeared at the hearing, so.
Okay.
I think this might be a little different than a shopping center, though.
Right.
Because a shopping center, at least you have, nobody in the community wants to see another shopping center.
Plus it was private, it was a
Right.
private entity.
Right.
This is
It's a little different, right, I agree with you. That's why I want to be a little careful. I think, you know, I don't want to tell the board what to do. I think, it's just look, from a planning point of view, we've done a huge amount of work to create more activity in the village center and the office zones. And really, you know, get people to focus there, and this is not within the planning objectives we've set for the village. And we would encourage them to try to do that.
I would certainly support a letter being published in a paper.
Okay.
I would too.
Urging,
Okay.
I mean,
Urging the
in
board
all
to look
additions, in all additions.
Send the copy to the mayor and trustees as well. I
Right,
think.
but we always do. We always do that. Yeah.
But also it's the, I know to support our objectives, which has always been to strengthen the center and keep office stuff the way it is, but also to mention at least that since the children that go there and the families that are represented there are part of the community, that they shouldn't exempt themselves in this building from the community of which they're a part.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
And especially in this case where it's 19 employees they're talking about, at least, which is a substantial amount.
It's $250,000 per person. Sorry, just a quick number. 270, I'm sorry. I rounded down, I should be, 270,000 per person.
300?
What other business what business would ever do that?
You know, there's more, you know, just say the obvious, there's more flexibility in an office building. You take an office and then you need to shrink it or you need to expand it.
Right.
You don't have to,
Just one
you know,
architect?
that happens all the time. Very different than when you're using a house.
Is there any office space available on Hampton Road currently?
I don't know, that's not what they looked at. They looked, I think, at 3 options on North Sea Road.
Yeah, there were 3 options.
North Sea Road.
Right.
Hampton Road sometimes has office space. I mean, there's that huge,
But they need 7,000 feet. That's a big amount.
What about the old antique store on Hampton Road?
I'm sorry?
The old antique store on Hampton Road, east of Narrow Lane.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
I
been
don't
for sale
know.
on.
Well, what about the car dealership? I mean, hey.
There is
I know, there's a contract.
There's a tenant for the car dealership.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's going to be, what is it?
Not on camera. Not on camera.
What is it?
Later.
Later.
Okay. So can
Oh,
we?
it's later.
Well, thank you. So I want to spend a few minutes. Joe and Laura have been talking to the town about affordable housing, so I thought we should give them an opportunity to talk about what they found out.
Well, Joe and I went and met with Diana Weir, who's the chair of the department of the town called Housing and Community Development. And the department of the town consists of Diana Weir and a part-time secretary. And then the town also has an entity that they appointed called the Housing Authority that has members that are also appointed by the trustees of the town. They recently, you may have read, recently they had a drawing for 2 affordable housing units Currently, they have 900 people on their registry for affordable housing. Basically, she sent us through the workings of this and how it works and everything. It's pretty much, it's governed by HUD. Of course, HUD has a say. Suffolk County has a say, and there are documents that say what that say is about incomes and median incomes and whether you can apply for a mortgage or whether you're going to rent or, anyway. So the question is, and really it just comes, to my mind, comes down to three things. If the village wants to pursue a department within the village, like the town, for affordable housing, the process would probably take about 2 years. It'd be subject to public referendums, and you need money, and you need properties, of course, and then you need motivation by both property owners and municipalities to go forward with this kind of thing. I don't know, really briefly, the other alternative that's a possibility is to partner with the town. And in that instance, I would think that Diana Weir, as the one person who is a part of that department, should be joined, perhaps, by somebody designated by the village, so that we have a say in what goes on in the town's operations of affordable housing. And more, but that's just one idea. I will say that you might have read about it in the newspaper, that they're talking about increasing the CPF by 0.5 percentage point. Have you read about that? Well, they're talking about that, and that 0.5 percentage point, and that's going to a vote, that will go to a vote. If they get that 0.5 percentage point, that is earmarked specifically for affordable and workforce housing. And the village, I know, contributes a lot to that CPF fund. And we also are able to take out exactly what we put in. So in other words, if that passes, that 0.5% for affordable housing, we would be able, the village, for whatever they put in, would be able to take that money out for that purpose within the village. So anyway, this is just preliminary information. And I don't know, but I was struck by the numbers of people on that registry waiting for housing, affordable workforce housing, 900 people. That's a lot.
900 families.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And just two, there were just 2 opportunities recently, just 2 that went to lottery. I don't know, we all benefit from firemen, teachers,
Hospital.
all kinds of people. And to keep a community vital, we need them here. And we need them to have their families here. We need them as part of our community. So that's all.
What is to happen to the hospital?
That's the question. Well, that's
that could be affordable.
It's privately owned.
Yeah, the hospital, obviously, we all know has a plan to move. They've inked their deal with them. They're now part of the Stony Brook Hospital. The plan is for them to move to the former Southampton College, now SUNY Stony Brook campus. I don't think there's a time frame on it yet, although I know they're working on it. And, the mayor has asked us to look at how we might approach zoning in the future when the hospital moves, because it's both the hospital and, interestingly, in the context of the conversation we just had, it's also all the buildings around the hospital that are owned by the hospital and other medical buildings that might move if the hospital moves. So it's actually a lot of land within the village. Yeah, it is. And we've never had a policy in the village. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, but in many villages like this, if you build more than a certain number of units or you get a certificate of occupancy for more than a certain number of units, you have to have a percentage that are affordable. That's very typical. We've never done that. So for example, in Nantucket, if you want to do 10 units, I think 2 of them have to be affordable. I mean, it's very typical. We've never done anything like that. And there's advantages and disadvantages. We know from an economic point of view, those are expensive units. But it does, that's another way. And so if you did a new zone for the hospital, one way to do it would be to say if you want to do, condominiums, which someone might want to do, a certain percentage have to be affordable. That's, but those are, I think, all things we need to look at because there's obviously scarce land. It's not like we have vacant sites in the village. We can just say, just take that vacant site and make it affordable housing.
I only ask because in the city, St. Vincent's is now, and Cabrini, I live right next to, is also a condo. So, it's an interesting thing to look at for affordable housing.
Right. Well, money, motivation, and property.
Close to the beach. People would pay up for that.
Comments? Questions?
I just wanted to point one thing out. You comment about funding the CPF largely. The village also, there's been a lot of numbers thrown around. The village funds a great deal of the school budget. And I think for them to be doing something that, officially flies in the face of and is in opposition to the goals of the village is perhaps not the wisest thing to do. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you're writing your letter, you might want to.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Right, so they just to expand a little bit on what Laura said before, so the Community Preservation Fund, which was set up originally just to buy land, which the village can contribute a massive amount of money to, and very little of the land that's been purchased has been in the village for many reasons, including hard to buy, much more expensive, density and everything else. Was expanded several years ago to allow spending community preservation funds for clean water.
Clean water.
And now the new thing that's been proposed is to allow CPF funds to be used to build affordable housing. That will have to go to both the state legislature.
It's going to be a separate fund entirely.
Right, and a vote by the voters of the towns that are impacted on the East End. So.
Right.
Anything else?
Would the Peconic Land Trust have any land that the high school could?
They don't buy land for that purpose. They really buy land for open space. Right. Okay. Thank you. That's the meeting.
Great job.
April meeting.